Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 1st, 2023 meeting of the Fitchburg Board of Health. I now call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast, and I ask that anyone else in the audience who is recording this meeting please identify himself or herself for the record now by standing and stating your name and city of residence. At this time, I ask that all electronic devices be placed into silent mode. I would, before we get started on our agenda, I would just like to welcome a new member to the Board of Health. That is Diane Tousignant down at the far end of our group here. And welcome. We're looking forward to your input on all the matters that come before us. I think you'll find it interesting and at times challenging and hopefully an enjoyable experience. Welcome. Glad to have you.
I think she should do a 10-minute speech.
Yeah.
Just joking.
The rest of us have been here a while, including you. Anyway, we will get started on the agenda. Anyone in the audience who wishes, or anyone who wishes first to speak remotely should raise your hand. We'll first ask individuals who are here in person to speak, and then when that has been completed, we'll go ahead and take on anyone who wishes to speak by Zoom. So anyone who wishes to speak may approach the podium, identify herself by name and address, and identify the agenda item on which she wishes to speak. You may speak we allow 2 minutes for each speaker.
Jacqueline Wenche, Fitchburg resident, speaking on agenda item number 2. Our outdated mosquito control policy dates back to 1918. It is bad for people, pollinators, and the environment. We have the ability to opt out of this plan and create our own. On April 28, I forwarded you Greenfield's plan so you would have a sample. On Tuesday, I sent you a legislative briefing featuring subject matter experts from Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. Their message is that we should use the precautionary principle when it comes to chemicals. Other organizations that have endorsed mosquito reform in the state include the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions, Mass Sierra Club, Massachusetts Rivers Alliance, Mass Audubon, Conservation Law Foundation, Northeast Organic Farming Association, and Massachusetts Beekeepers Association. The State Mosquito Control for the 21st Century Task Force recommended we overhaul mosquito spraying, but until the state acts, it is up to us to protect ourselves and wildlife, such as bees, from harmful chemicals, including PFAS. Accordingly, we should opt out of the state's plan, which can subject us to aerial spraying without our having any say. You're trying to keep PFAS out of wells. You should also worry about it in the air, land, and other bodies of water. These chemicals never go away, and they bioaccumulate. Not only is current practice unhealthy, but it costs almost $100,000 a year that could be going to local mosquito control companies instead. Please bring us the change we need and deserve.
All right. First of all, I want to thank you for your input. I think, as I said at our meeting not long ago regarding fluoridation of water, I think it's healthy, actually, to bring up policies that we have, especially ones that have been longstanding, and to look at them again. Certainly, we can all learn why things are done and how we might change to make things better. So certainly is a reasonable question to raise, and I'll certainly, and I think the whole Board of Health will look for input to help us with the decision as to how to go forward from here. So I think you are the only in-person.
We do have a virtual.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so now we can Now we can go on, I think, to anyone who wishes to speak virtually.
Ms. Jacobson, you are set to, you.
Yes. Hi. Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Just fine.
Oh. Okay. Great. I'm calling in because I couldn't make it, and I know a lot of other people couldn't make it as well, just because it's 4 o'clock, and I know a lot of people are traveling, either out of work at 5 or 6, and they just can't make a 4 o'clock meeting. But there are a lot of concerns, and I'm not sure if you're voting on the mosquito spraying for Fitchburg or if you guys are just discussing it. And I know there's been a lot of history in Fitchburg about just not really taking in the public's consideration when doing things like fluoriding the water or now spraying the mosquitoes. So I'm really hoping that you guys would consider public input, and that many of us are really trying to stay away from the chemicals. We don't want our yards, our vegetable gardens sprayed with chemicals. And then also we have Mosquito Squad that's right here in Fitchburg, and that would be detrimental to that business here in Fitchburg. And we should really try to help the businesses in Fitchburg and not really put them out of business. So, for the people who want their yard sprayed, they have Mosquito Squad. It's an option. But many of us don't want chemicals. And if you could just please consider it, and if it could be a little bit clearer by the end of the meeting, just so that we know if we could, if you're voting on it today, or if there's going to be another opportunity for people to come in person. Maybe a later meeting might help to get actual input from the public. So I guess that's all I have to say, but please take the public's input on this matter. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that comment. We're certainly listening as to whether we'll make a final decision today. I think we'll need to see what happens during this meeting. But again, I appreciate your input. Do you, either of you have comments that you'd like to make?
Not right now, no.
Ready? I think that I'm really glad that we're looking into it, because I know that, as a school nurse in Fitchburg, we have hundreds of children who have asthma. And it had been a thought that I had years ago to make the Fitchburg schools fragrance-free environment. And so I'm not saying that mosquito spray has fragrance or anything, but anything that you're putting into the air. And, from what I understand, people are told when the spraying is going to happen. I'm not sure if that happens in Fitchburg. I have never been aware when the spraying was happening, but if there's a safer and a better way to do it, I would like to hear more about it.
Thank you. Yes, someone has come in, I think, first of all, is that the end of the remote?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Did you wish to say something in person then?
Excuse me. I just recently found out about this, so I don't think the public has been...
Before you get started, we just ask you to introduce yourself.
Sorry. My name is Jean Robbie. I live in Fitchburg.
Yes.
I just recently found out, so first of all, I don't think the public is being notified on decisions that are going to be making their health worse. I myself spent too many years fighting cancer. I have one lung. I don't need more stuff sprayed on me. There's enough with the chemtrails. I don't think it would be healthy for our vegetable gardens that some of us are growing. You cannot predict where it's going to end up. You cannot control when you spray aerial. You cannot control exactly where it's going to be. All our surrounding towns, they need to be notified of the same thing, just as the Fitchburg residents. And as she stated, there are way too many children out there already with asthma and other lung conditions, as well as adults. And I just really wish you would really reconsider doing that. There are many pest control companies that can take care of the problems. Many people hire them to come out and spray their pond or around their backyard. That's not being put aerial. It's not going into the house down the road or the children. So I'm really against any aerial spraying at all. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that is all.
Fitchburg didn't notify people last time. My windows were open when they did the truck spraying, and I had a newborn, and I was very upset when I found out afterwards that my house was sprayed, and I had a newborn sleeping with the windows open. Many residents didn't find out till afterwards, so that was already happened when you guys sprayed with the trucks.
All right. Thanks again for your comments. All right. I think we'll have opportunity to hear from those who are involved in the mosquito control project. Am I correct? And is that appropriate
That's
at this
correct.
point? Okay. Would one of you or both of you like to educate us as well?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I'm Tim DeShamsi, Executive Director at the Central Mass Mosquito Control Project, and I do thank members of the board for the invitation today to come out and speak to not only you, but the public as well. Before I start my presentation, I just want to touch on a couple of points that have been raised that might not necessarily be in the presentation itself. The materials that I had read prior to this meeting referenced aerial spraying, and it referenced an opt-out procedure that was legislation that was passed in the year 2020 that expired in the year 2022. So there's no need for the city to have to go through the opt-out procedure because that procedure doesn't currently exist at this time. But also, I'd like to assure people that aerial spraying in Fitchburg has never been done. Now, whether it ever will be done, I can't say. I don't have a crystal ball, of course, but I've been working at Central Mass Mosquito for 40 years, Fitchburg being a member since 1974, and no aerial spraying has ever been performed in the city of Fitchburg for mosquito control itself. The PFAS issue is an issue that we all are aware of, and we were made aware of it several years ago. All of our pesticides have gone through independent testing, and none of the pesticides we currently use or had been using have any levels of PFAS that can be detected. So that is something that we're very concerned of as well. As far as school children, schools themselves have a special procedure in place that in order for any pesticides to be applied on the property, there's a plan that has to be filed with the state, there's notifications that have to go out to parents, and most importantly for us, the schools have to ask us for the application to be performed. So we have not gone out to any schools in Fitchburg and done these applications without currently following that law, which has been in existence for probably a good 15, closer to 20 years now. It's called the Children's Protection Act. So there have been a lot of policies in place already that have addressed some of the concerns that have been raised here initially. But I think my presentation may answer some other questions, and certainly if other questions arise at that point, I'm more than happy to answer them as best I can. So,
Thank you.
now, do I advance the slides, or would you do that for me, Steve?
I will do that for you, sir.
Okay, so I'll just give you a look. There's a lot of slides, but a lot of them are just title slides, so we go through some of these fairly quickly. So you can go to the next one.
Could I ask a question already?
Sure, certainly.
Just, could you tell us a little bit about what the mosquito control facility is? In other words, the project, who's on that?
Yes,
Who
my
controls-
initial slides do
Okay.
explain our setup and how we're organized,
All
so
right. Okay,
I do
I'm sorry.
address that right off the bat.
Thanks. Oh, there you go.
So mosquito control agencies are state agencies that are formed under the Department of Agricultural Resources. We each, our enabling legislation is Mass General Law, Chapter 252, and then each district that was formed by the member communities have their own enabling legislation, and our legislation was enacted in 1973 with our program beginning in 1974. We operate under the authority of the State Reclamation and Mosquito Control Board, and that is comprised of members of Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, Department of Conservation and Recreation, and the Mass Department of Environmental Protection. Those are the three agencies that oversee all mosquito control operations in Massachusetts. We, of course, also have important partnerships, Mass Department of Public Health being our most important partner. All of the surveillance that we do, the adult mosquitoes that we capture are identified at our office and sent into their lab in Jamaica Plain for testing. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But we also have important partnerships with the EPA, most importantly in their WasteWise program, which is part of the recycling efforts we do, in addition to the Pesticide Environmental Stewardship Program, which does promote practices reducing pesticide use. Very quickly on mosquito biology, they do go through 4 stages of development like many insects do. The first 3 stages are dependent on still stagnant water. So the eggs are laid either on or near water. They develop into larvae, which go through 4 different life stages, and then the pupae are the fully formed mosquito. So as you can see, those first 3 stages are in the aquatic habitats, and the mosquito emerges and starts to fly around. Mosquito adults is approximately 2,600 species worldwide, about 162 in the United States. We have identified 52 different species in Massachusetts, and it can vector or transmit several diseases in the Northeast. Their flight range is also dependent upon species. It can be as little as about 100 yards or up to as far as 25 miles. Then briefly, some larval mosquito habitat that we identify and monitor in Massachusetts each year. So the very many different types of habitat. The retention-detention areas are areas mandated by stormwater regulations, but we have a lot of natural woodland pools, reef flood areas, red and maple cedar swamps, permanent water, etc. There's no salt marsh in our district, thankfully. So briefly on how mosquito control is operating in Massachusetts. We are one of 11 organized districts. This is a map statewide, each color signifying the different districts that are organized. I put a circle in the area around Fitchburg, so you can see we work in Fitchburg, Leominster, Lunenburg, and the city of Gardner, and then we flow out from that point. Then this next slide is just a slightly expanded area of our service map at this time. The communities that are in white are currently not part of an organized district at this time. Then the services that we do offer to our member communities and residents, there's 8 main services, the first 6 being proactive services, the 7th being adult control or mosquito spraying, which some consider reactive, but I consider proactive. By killing an adult mosquito before it gets infected with a disease is a proactive approach. And then we also perform research and efficacy to make sure that our products and procedures are currently effective as well. So adult mosquito surveillance is performed in all of our member communities in the summer season on a weekly basis. Steve? We deploy approximately 675 traps across our 44 member communities. If we do identify virus through Mass Department of Public Health protocols, then we will place additional traps in that area to determine population species, densities, and if additional virus isolations. And of course, any intervention options are discussed with our health departments as well. Again, I've mentioned all our samples are sent into Jamaica Plain. They're currently testing for West Nile virus, Eastern equine encephalitis, and if there are other diseases of concern, they will do that testing for us as well. This is just some numbers from last year. We tested over 1,200 collections of 3,300 in total. Of those collections, 24,886 were actually tested of 61,000. We did not identify any Triple-E virus in our service area. However, we did have 6 West Nile virus pools in a few of our member communities. And I just wanted to note those first 2 bullet points, those numbers are approximately half of what we typically see. We may recall there was a pretty significant drought last year. So our mosquito numbers did drop dramatically, and we did end our spray program prior to Labor Day, which has not occurred in well over 10 years. Public education is a key component of our program itself. We do have educational programs that our entomologists will go out to the school systems. We've actually done a few presentations in Fitchburg, I believe it was last week. Bookmarks that go in our town libraries. Our biologist, as part of his master's degree in public health, created a senior citizens program, educate them about mosquito diseases, how they can protect themselves. And then, of course, we have education through public programs, brochures. We're active in social media as well. We have a full-service website where residents can learn all about our program, the products, procedures, pesticides, notifications, et cetera. This is new for us. We just had a video produced of all of our program itself. It runs just a little bit more than 10 minutes, and it's currently on YouTube, so you can go to our main page and click on a YouTube link, and you can watch a brief 10-minute video of our different procedures that we perform. Ditch maintenance is restoring ditch systems to historic flow patterns. Again, mosquito larvae can only develop in still stagnant water. So we do have a wetland scientist on staff. She's a former conservation agent. Most of the work we perform is done using low-impact hand and power tools. Any more extensive projects are used specially designed low ground pressure equipment, and we do receive receipt of property owner permission before we do any of this work. Larval mosquito control, our technicians are trained to identify mosquito larvae in their larval habitats. So we do use pretty exclusively the BTI product. However, we started with the spinosad product a few years back as part of our pre-hatch larval control, which I'll talk about in a second. Those first two products, we do use organic formulations that are available to us. And then there's another bacterial product that we use in catch basins, an insect growth regulator called methoprene, which is commonly used also in flea and tick products. Then we have some limited use of some surfactants or oils when we do find only mosquito pupae, because they don't ingest the larvae, so they're not controlled that way. So our pre-hatch program, we started with field trials about 6 years ago. We found that the spinosad product, which is bacterial, has about a 30-day operational window. So we can actually go out and put it on snow or ice in areas of historical larval activity. And we have shown anywhere from 95 to 100% control over that 30-day period. So it allows us to start that larval control program even earlier. As you can see, this technician is looking at an area that actually has snow in front of him. But a majority of our larval control is done with granular BTI. That'd be the same product if you went to the store and bought mosquito dunks. That's strictly the BTI granule that's compressed into a disc itself. They do have to identify active mosquito larvae at that point, because the BTI product is only effective for about a day or two. And then we have sites, of course, their database to put on tablets, and they're checked throughout the active mosquito larval season, so we can try to get them while they're in that contained habitat and before they emerge as adults. Catch basin program just started up for us last week. Storm drains or catch basins are preferred habitat for the Culex mosquito, which is our main vector or transmitter of West Nile virus. Catch basins, of course, can hold water for a long period of time. We just finished the downtown area of Fitchburg, and I believe we've now treated over 2,000 basins in the city of Fitchburg itself just in the past week and a half. And all these applications are tracked by GPS. So this is a map of the city of Worcester. Green are catch basins that have been treated and are currently active with product. We do use an extended 30-day product in these areas. The red dots are catch basins that were treated at one point but now need to be retreated again. So again, we can get very good mapping of all of our treatments for the catch basins over the summer period. Abandoned swimming pools are another area of concern for us. We do organize through our health departments to alert residents and send letters out directly to addresses that we have databased. But unopened swimming pools can actually be a pretty significant larval habitat. So we have products that are bacterial in nature that will last a full 90-day period. So one application is sufficient for the summer month. If the resident does decide to open the pool, that's not a problem. Source reduction is recycling tires. I am happy to say that the city of Fitchburg has been #1 as far as recycling tires in our program. I have some numbers for you in a second. But this program, we've cleaned up large piles of tires. We have curbside pickup where residents can call us. We'll schedule a pickup for them. Discarded on the sides of the road. Technicians will see these, grab it, throw it in the back of the truck, bring it back to the office. And we have also communicated with a lot of the ward cleanups going probably back about 12 or 15 years now.
At least.
Right, so we've done coordination with those events as well. Next. So it did begin in 2010, operating off an initial grant through our professional association, but we have been funding it now as part of our operating budget since then. We're going to hit 45,000 tires recycled this year. I'm confident of it. We're only a few hundred away from it as well. And I do want to give kudos to my partner over there because he is the one that directs that program very carefully. And then this next one, again, 72 tires in the ward cleanups this year. Kind of a small number for us. We're used to a few hundred, but again, Fitchburg is the #1 community for recycling tires. Over 5,000 tires, or over 11% of our total, have been recycled from city residents. So it's been a great program for us this whole time, and we're hoping it continues for a long time to come. Beaver mitigation is trying to negate some of the aspects of beaver populations. We have not done any of these projects in the city as of yet, but it is a program that is available. Steve? So it's a relatively new program for us, although it looks like we're coming up to 10 years pretty soon. But it is working through the emergency permitting process through both our health departments and conservation commissions. For us, it's been the installation of water level control devices and dam breaching. We do have licensed trappers on staff. However, we have not trapped any beavers to date. This is just a picture of a device going in the upper Charles River watershed in Halston about 6 or 7 years ago. Adult mosquito control, or mosquito spraying, is the program most people are familiar with us. We use a product called Edofenprox, which is classified as reduced risk by the EPA. It's not a residual product. It has a very rapid decomposition in the environment, and it has a very low toxicity to humans, pets, etc. So this is just a shot of the label itself. We use a 4% solution of Edofenprox. And over the size of an acre is approximately 0.75 ounces that's applied. And an acre is approximately 43,000, well, it's exactly 43,560 square feet. So as you can tell, it's a very small amount of pesticide that's applied over a very large area. And the reason we can still get control and minimize negative impacts to other insects is because mosquitoes are small and they're soft-bodied. So it only takes 1 or 2 of the 20-micron droplets to impinge upon them to offer the control. Other insects that may come in contact with that small amount, in many instances, will not have any negative aspects. That's just a quick screenshot of a truck actually performing an application. All of our applications begin after astronomical sunset. The mosquitoes' most active time is around dusk up to about midnight. They do have another period around 3 a.m. to around sunrise, but we have found the greatest control efforts are done from sunset on. So pyrethroids, which Edofenprox is in this family, are very commonly used in flea and tick sprays, restaurant applications, food and grain storage. These products are available to homeowners over the counter as well. Steve? This is a screenshot of the Hart's Ultra Guard, which is a topical treatment for dogs. I pulled out the active ingredient, which is Edofenprox, which is actually looks like 55% in concentration. That's actually applied on the back of the dog to control fleas and ticks. Now, again, we use a 4% solution. Mosquitoes are soft-bodied. Fleas and ticks, however, are hard-bodied, so higher concentrations are necessary to control them. So adult control or spraying is done by request of residents. So I want to say that again. If we do not receive requests to spray in Fitchburg, we do not spray in Fitchburg. If there's no virus present, if there's no request from residents or town officials to do the spraying, we're not going to spray. It's pretty simple. We actually don't do a lot of spraying in Fitchburg. Majority of our efforts are aimed at catch basin control, tire recycling, and larval control in area wetlands. And again, if we do identify virus, we always coordinate with our local officials so that we can determine the area that we want to have the greatest impact on, lowest risk, and also get the word out through your channels as well. It's not uncommon for virus to be identified in September or even into October, and our spray program is not what we're going to recommend to be done. The nights are too cool, the mosquito activity is not appropriate for the spraying. However, we still coordinate with our health departments to get the word out, to get people alerted to the fact that virus is still present and there's certain precautions and personal protection that can be performed as well. So our website has been redesigned to notify residents that put in a request that they get notified through email. All of our trucks are GPS tracked. They have tablets that alert them to certain instances. I'll show you a screenshot in a minute. The spray areas are detailed in a new report system, and all of our trucks are also equipped with ultrasonic weather stations. It's important for us to spray when temperatures are appropriate and wind speeds are appropriate. There's label restrictions on that. Temperatures above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, wind speeds less than 10 miles per hour. So in the past, we would carry small handheld weather stations. Now these operators have right on their tablet a small window that shows them exactly the current weather conditions that they see. This is a map of one of our spray applications. So the green lines are when the truck was actually spraying. The red lines are when the truck had the machine on but was not spraying. And then you can see in the treatment log, we actually can get down to the minute and actually the second when that application was done, the wind direction, the wind speed, the temperature, et cetera. And then also, most importantly, on this map, those orange polygons or rectangles, those are no spray areas. Again, all of our program residents can exclude from. If they do not want to have spraying on their property, there's a process through the Mass Department of Agriculture where they can exclude that property. It then goes on a paper sheet, because I believe electronic is great, but paper is never going to fail me. So they carry a clipboard with the paper exclusions as well as their tablets that outline these properties, and as they approach the properties, the technicians will get audible and visual warnings to alert them to shut the sprayer down. Next screen. And this is just, again, a quick shot of the ultrasonic weather station as well, and that black box is what the technicians actually see on their tablet itself. So again, exclusion properties, they can register through Department of Agriculture. It's an electronic program. If the residents do need to do a paper process, there's a phone number that can be called as well. They do not do it through our office. It is important for residents to do this through MDR because they're the ones that track these things. But again, the technicians, before they do these applications in the daytime, they will go out and confirm that their tablets are correct with the exclusion property, as well as their paper list coincides as well. As part of the regulations, residents are supposed to post their property. We do request that they do because it gives our technicians an additional layer and protection for the resident themselves. Unfortunately, in our experience, only about 10 or 15% of the properties actually posted as well. But we do encourage the exclusions to put up the paper plates. Now, we do have a notification process as well. We send out monthly schedules to all of our boards of health, city and town clerks 2 weeks prior to the start of each month. It gives them an idea when we have each of our communities planned during the upcoming month. And then each day before the spray applications are done, don't forget they're done at night, we put a street listing on our phone system where residents can call after 3:30 when the office closes. They can listen to a recorded message and hear the communities we're going to be in and the streets we have scheduled. And there's also an answering service where if that information is not sufficient, they can punch through to an answering service that can give them additional information. We also put that information on our website about the same time each day. So residents do have that opportunity to find out where we're going to be sprayed. Landing rates are an important part of our surveillance program. Sounds a little silly, but it's when a technician goes out and stands and counts the number of mosquitoes attempting to land on the tech. It's important because that gives us information on the human-biting mosquitoes. I mentioned earlier 52 species. Many of them don't bite people. There's about 15 that we're concerned about with disease transmission. Some strictly bite cold-blooded animals. Some only bite birds. Some are just pretty rare, and we don't see much of them anyway. But when the technicians are able to, they will go out, they'll do a landing rate, and it confirms to them that we have human-biting mosquitoes in the area and temperature and wind speeds are appropriate so that the application can occur. We do suspend landing rates when virus is identified in Massachusetts, of course, to lower the risk as much as possible for our technicians. However, you can see last year we did perform 164 landing rates, and 106 of those, well more than half, resulted in no application. The weather was too cool, the wind was too high, it was starting to rain or something like that. So again, our final program, research and efficacy, we've had questions in the past, how do you know what you're doing works? Just because it's labeled for a product, it does go through a registration process, which does show that it's efficacious as well as a lower risk to other things, but we want to prove these things to ourselves as well. So we've done a lot of different experiments and justifications over the few decades now. Some of our past studies, we've captured mosquitoes to determine what type of animals they're actually preying upon. We've sent them to Connecticut to have DNA testing. Our catch basin program, is it working? The products we're putting in, are they controlling like we expect them to? Spraying for mosquitoes, how do we know that when we spray it's actually working? Well, we'll put traps out pre and post. Host-seeking activity, when are mosquitoes most active? Does it concur with literature? Thankfully, it does. And then we've also surveyed our residents over the past years to get an idea on when they called, did they receive service appropriate, and did it actually work for them as well. We can test new products and procedures. Our pre-hatch program, for example, I've been around long enough to remember pre-hatch back in the early 1980s, was done with chemical products that are no longer available. There's been attempts over the previous few years to find other products that would actually work, but again, they tend to be biological in nature. However, when we came upon that spinosad product, which is a certified organic bacteria, we did find we were getting good results, so we were able to bring that program back into our toolbox, if you will. We've also performed pesticide resistance. I had a question a number of years ago. How do I know that the pesticides we're putting out are not developing resistance in mosquitoes? I couldn't answer the question. But it made us realize that we're not the only ones that perform pesticide applications. There's homeowners, there's companies, there's golf courses. So while our products and procedures are low residual, only in small targeted areas, there's other pressures that insects can see from other applications as well. So we did start that 14 years ago. We do the CDC bottle bioassay, which has been recommended to us. And thankfully, up to this point, we have not noted any resistance to the pesticides that we're currently using. And then just very briefly on mosquito-borne diseases. Both West Nile virus and Triple E are in the bird populations. Birds come up through migratory patterns, bring up these viruses from the southern latitudes. Mosquitoes will vector and amplify the viruses through the bird populations, and then on occasion, a mosquito that's less discriminate on its host might bite a bird, pick up a virus, lay eggs, then bite a human or a horse and transmit the virus. When mosquitoes bite us, they inject us with a small amount of saliva to thin out our blood. If you can imagine trying to drink a thick milkshake with a thin straw, it's difficult. Unfortunately, in that saliva, there can be pathogens. That's how malaria and heartworm and all the viruses are passed on to us. So some numbers from last year, statewide, 95 pools or collections of mosquitoes. No horses positive. There's good vaccinations for horses for West Nile and Tripoli. Unfortunately, there were 8 human cases of West Nile last year. And that's just the risk map that ended last year. You can see Fitchburg being in the low risk for West Nile virus ending 2021. Triple-E, thankfully, we see goose eggs all across the board. There was no Triple-E identified in either mosquitoes, horses, or humans last year. So it was a very good year for Triple-E because we did not see any. And that's last year's end-of-season map as well. They do tend to carry over some of these areas, the risk from one year to the next. However, you can see the Twin Cities is in the remote area, just bordering on a low risk area from, I believe that would be Lunenburg, possibly. But
Yep.
Then my last couple of slides, personal protection. Let's use our repellents whenever possible. DEET is the gold standard. However, there are other products available on the market as well. We do ask people look at the EPA label to make sure that it's both been tested for efficacy and is not going to harm you. A lot of people ask us about the percentage of DEET. Should I use 100%, 50%, 20%? The higher the percentage, the longer the duration of protection. For children, we don't recommend anything more than 20%. Infants, I wouldn't recommend it at all, frankly. For us, 30% is max. I tend to find the 15 to 20% works just fine. Summertime, we tend to sweat a bit, so you might have to reapply anyway. We don't recommend the combination products of sunscreen and DEET because I feel sunscreen should be reapplied more often than the DEET products do, but again, it's a personal preference. Then there's permethrin is actually a contact insecticide. It's in the family of pyrethroids. It is not for skin. It's for clothing. The military started using this many years ago. It has been shown to be very effective to keep mosquitoes in, ticks, and like when my son was deployed in Iraq, they have sandflies. I mean, it's a very good product for clothing only. Can withstand several washings, and there's actually some products on the market you can buy impregnated with permethrin, or you can buy it yourself as a liquid and spray it on your pant legs and let it dry. I typically apply it for my knees on down and my shoes as well, and then keep them in the basement. Then picaridin and PMD, shorter effectiveness, but they don't have quite the greasiness of DEET. And then there's some natural repellents that everybody has their own story about, some concoction that they made up. Whether it works or not, I can't say. We recommend looking for an EPA registration number because it has gone through some pretty stringent testing. And then just, again, don't use repellents under your clothing. Your clothing is a good barrier to begin with. If you have cuts or irritated skin, it's going to sting, so you don't want to do it anyway. And then your sensitive areas like your eyes and your mouth, put it on your hands and then maybe wipe. And same for a child as well. And that was it.
Thank you.
15 minutes, right? Sorry.
Well, I thought that was terrific. Thank you very much. You're very well organized. I think you did a very informative and educational presentation.
I'll take a seat, but again, we're here for the duration if there are questions.
Thanks. I think we much appreciate it. Does either of you have a question that you would like to ask? Or
I do have a question, actually. So you mentioned aerial spraying has not been done in Fitchburg, but it doesn't sound like it couldn't be done in Fitchburg at some point. What would the criteria be for you to come out and actually have to aerial spray?
Well, it wouldn't be us. When it was done in Metro West in 2019, that's the first time it's been done in our service area since I started. We were strictly ground crew. We were doing some of the trapping, doing some of the testing, helping them organize a few areas. If aerial spraying were to occur, Mass Department of Public Health would have to declare, they'd have to make a declaration. There's a couple of different levels of declaration. Okay. And then the State Reclamation Board would get involved. They'd notify the district, and then again, we would act as, the side party, if you will. So there would be, there'd be a lot of virus, so it wouldn't necessarily be a surprise per se. Right. Certainly it would be to some people that may not, keep up with this or hadn't heard the news, if you will. But the criteria in Metro West back in 2019 was pretty dire. We had never seen anything like that. Our traps, almost every trap we were bringing in had triple E. It had it in mammal-biting species. It had it in big numbers. Our ground crews we were literally spraying complete cities and towns. We were getting stressed to the limit, and Mass Department of Public Health had come in, and they do their separate testing as well, but they came in and they said, this is looking like it's going to get worse before it gets better, because ground spraying is effective, but it has its limitations. Generally, 200 to 300 feet is about our best effective reach. Whereas aerial spraying, of course, they can get much more than they can get 100% in some instances. So then the decision was made, well above us, of course, to actually do those applications. They flew out of the city of Worcester Airport. But certainly the community health departments were well involved in the decision-making process. I know a lot of phone calls were going out to my member boards of health. I was getting it from them as well because, as you're aware, we communicate very closely. So they were, public health just called me, what's going on? And I tried to give them our assessment of it. But it's generally, these decisions are made well above me, even up to the governor's office on occasion. So, but it wouldn't, again, there'd be some strong indications that it might become necessary. And that's certainly something, if that we were approaching that, you could ask me what I might think. It would strictly be an opinion, because of course they're not going to call me and say whether we should do it or not. But I've been around long enough to know that when the indications are starting to pop up, they might propose it at least. They've proposed aerial spraying in the past and have not done it. Weather conditions were maybe going to turn, or they've actually tried to do it in a preemptive program. In 1991, as I recall, we had a lot of Tripoli in 1990, and in 1991 a hurricane had come through, and it flooded a lot of areas, and our trap counts were starting to pick up again. And the state actually did a larvicide program where they put the BTI in wetlands to try to knock down any new emergence coming out from the hurricane waters that we had seen. And subsequently, at least in my area, we did not see any additional triple-E. So, you know, it did seem to make a big difference.
Okay. And I guess I had one more question, if you don't mind. You mentioned that there's an opt-out procedure. Is that something that's available on your website? There are some instructions there?
Yes, the exclusion process, we have a button right on the right side. It says no spray information. They simply click on that. Then there's a direct link to Mass Department of Agriculture's page. A few questions, obviously, name, address, a certification that you're the actual property owner. What then happens is an email is generated that goes to their office, but also our office as well. So we typically tend to get them same day or next day, and in most instances we can get them in our program within a day or two.
Excellent. Thank you.
They do expire at the end of each calendar year, though, so I do want to point that out as well.
Okay,
so they have to be renewed each year.
Okay, that is good to know, too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't sit quite yet. Diane, did you have a question, or?
Well, it sounds like you're doing a great job preventing what could be a bigger mosquito population with what you're already doing. And if I'm understanding right, if you were to have to come in with your trucks, that's what you're typically doing, right? You're not doing aerial spraying,
Correct.
You're doing just...
Yeah,
right.
if we get a request to spray, it's strictly done truck mounted. We don't have access to airplanes.
So would you get a request, do you ever get requests from individual homeowners or from, I'm just going to throw this out there, like say, you know, we have some big events coming up, maybe that are going to be outdoors, maybe a couple days before you
Yes.
get requests like that?
Yes, it's not uncommon for town officials to alert us of an outdoor event. They ask us, can we come, you know, a day or two ahead of time to get that area to knock the numbers down. And also, yes, individual residents can put the spray request in if the technician determines they're able to do that. Now, they have a lot of criteria they have to look at. Are they close to fish-bearing waters? We're not going to spray. Are they too close to an exclusion property? We're not going to spray. Then, of course, the weather conditions. Now, weather conditions are a bit different because if we're not able to spray, we can reschedule it. But if they are too close to a pond or fish-bearing water or an exclusion, it's canceled. And we sometimes have to deal with an angry resident because they want to be sprayed, but they found out that the people next door don't want it. We have to explain to them that we have to do the best that we can. There's other services we can offer to that resident, our larval control program. Maybe there's an area further down, further away from the exclusion, we might be able to do a little bit of a spray application for. But it's always a balancing act. It's balancing the risk of the application of pesticides versus the risk from the mosquitoes themselves, and balancing, you know, the needs of the residents in our communities.
And if a resident would request that you did some spraying in their area, are they then going to pay you for that?
No, all of the service I outlined today are covered by the assessment that the city pays for on an annual basis. And it's an assessment that comes from the cherry sheet or the local aid package. So it's withheld by the state from the local aid package and then put into our budget. So everything I outlined today, there's no additional cost to the city itself or residents themselves.
Do I understand, maybe I missed something, when you spray, is it Fitchburg property or do you spray private properties as well and people have to opt out of that? Or
Yes.
I wasn't sure if you have to opt in to get sprayed or if you opt out, you're going to get sprayed.
To opt out means there'll be no spraying done on that property at all.
Right.
If residents request it, then the technician will go out and determine the extent of the application, whether it's needed. It might be an individual property. It's not uncommon for neighborhoods to get together and several requests call in at the same time, so they might spray a good part of the neighborhood as well. But it really depends upon the situation that they see at that time. You know, downtown city proper here, there wouldn't be much, if anything, we could do. But like up on Ringe Road or something like that, there's definitely enough wooded areas that, you know, we could perform a decent application if the weather conditions were appropriate.
So in other words, you don't just go out and spray properties all over town. People have to ask to be sprayed.
Correct.
If I'm understanding. Mm-hmm. And it's been mentioned there are private companies that individuals can pay to do this. Do you know what difference they would utilize in terms of chemicals or percentage of application, or what's the difference?
Yes. A lot of those private companies started showing up around the early 2000s when West Nile virus came into the nation, unfortunately. It really depends upon the company themselves. Some of them use strictly natural products that are not subject to EPA registration, so it's an opinion-based, whether it's effective or not, and what any detrimental effects could occur. Others do use EPA products, but again, it really would depend upon the company and the technicians themselves. Since they're for-profit, most of the products I have seen used tend to be pyrethroids. Again, it's the most common class of insecticide that's used, and they do tend to be residual in nature because they're doing it as a for-profit, on a for-profit basis. So a homeowner would call a private company, they would come out, do an application, charge a fee, and in some or many instances also offer a guarantee as well. So of course it would be in their best interest to offer something that if they have a 30-day guarantee that would last 30 days because they wouldn't want to come back to do a reapplication. But again, there's a lot of variables in these private companies, and there's just really too many for me to touch upon. I know it was mentioned earlier that, you know, we're a threat to the private companies. I think how we operate and how they operate, there's enough difference, and there's certainly room for all of us to coexist because we have for, you know, going on more than 20 years now. The way they do it, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that it's just different. You know, the way we do it is the way we're basically allowed to do it. You know, we do have some extended residuals we could use and have started to, we have a sprayer in place in case we wanted to do that, but it would strictly be done in a recreational area upon request of the community to either lower risk from disease or an application for a large-scale event. We wouldn't be using that in any of the residential programs themselves. So again, it's kind of apples and oranges, but you know, we've coexisted, like I said, for quite some time.
Yeah, just as a physician, I'm not aware of, not heard of any adverse effects to human beings from the bacteria that are used to suppress or to kill mosquitoes. So I think those are all safe as far as application goes, far as I know.
And we are fortunate because they're naturally occurring products. You're right. The efficacy, you know, against us is nil. I mean, the only thing, our technicians do have to wear a dust mask because there's some particulate matter that we need to be cautious about. But other than that, they're naturally occurring bacteria that, you know, and the great thing about BTI specifically is not only does it not impact us, it doesn't impact any of the other aquatic invertebrates. BTI is effective on mosquito larvae, black fly larvae, and a couple of species of midge, and that's it. So your endangered species invertebrates, as well as, of course, the salamanders and everything else, they have no impact by this bacteria at all because of its mode of action. BTI needs to be ingested by the mosquito, and when it does, the larvae have a specific pH in their stomach that allows a toxin to grow. Other insects can eat this BTI, and it strictly just passes through the system and does not harm them. So, do you have something you wanted to add, Tim? Or?
Just would like you to touch on what we've done to reduce any impacts we may have on bees.
Yes, that's a good point, Tim. Thank you. The managed bee populations as well as the wild bee populations is also something we're very concerned about as well. Back in 2007, the State Reclamation Board, you know, again, the board that oversees us, created a policy that we're not allowed to spray until after astronomical sunset, and that was because of bee populations as well as the other native pollinators as well. So we take great care in identifying beehives. We encourage our beekeepers to register as a no-spray so that we're aware of where they are. It's also, believe it or not uncommon for a beekeeper to call us to do an application. As long as they know when we're coming, they'll put a wet sheet over their hive. We'll come and do the application. Then a few hours later, we'll take that sheet off. But it is important to alert us to these areas so we can avoid them as much as possible. And you know, by spraying at night when bees are not actively foraging, you know, we're minimizing risk to them as well.
Lastly, what is the size of your staff? It sounds like you're busy as heck.
Yeah, it is. We have 25 full-time employees. As our service area has expanded, we've been fortunate enough to be able to bring on more staff and equipment. In the summertime, we hire anywhere from 10 to 15 seasonal employees as well to operate our traps, help identify mosquitoes, do catch basin applications, et cetera. When I started, we had 28 communities, so it's been a significant change over the many years I've been there. West Nile virus, of course, brought the most interest into the program, and I think within a 4-year period, we added almost a dozen communities since then. But we've been very stable at that point. City of Gardner was a new member probably 7 or 8 years ago now in this area, and then 2 years ago, Grafton and Bolton also joined into the program.
And I had said that was my last question, but one other that just popped into my mind. There's also been some concern that's arisen with regard to gardens and some of these materials getting into gardens. Is there any evidence that any of these materials have any harmful effect if they're on vegetables and get ingested by human beings?
Again, the environmental testing that's been done, even after aerial spraying, does not find any residues from any of these products themselves. We do, however, recommend residents wash their vegetables. I would do that anyway. And certainly if a resident has a garden and they're concerned about our program, file an exclusion. The exclusion doesn't matter to us. We don't ask questions like, why do you want to be excluded? It's simply if it's a health reason or an environmental reason, or it doesn't matter. An exclusion to us is important. It needs to be identified and recognized, and that's the end of it. And that's why, as I said earlier, if we get a spray request next to an exclusion, 9 times out of 10, we're not going to do that event, that spray event. On rare occasions, we might contact the exclusion. They might say, oh, yeah, Joe's my buddy. I don't like it, but let me just go out and I'll go to the movies tonight. It doesn't happen that much. Typically, if an exclusion is too close to a spray property, it's just simply not done. And then we deal with the after effect afterwards. But it's a pretty easy, the people come in, why didn't you spray me? And then we explain why, and they're kind of like, oh, okay, and they understand most of the time. When they don't, there's other people we can push them up, as well. Pesticide board and things like that. So
wonderful. Ms. Wetchy, do you have a question?
Yeah, so you said that you avoid spraying areas where there are fish. So to me, that indicates there is a danger in the products. If it's bad for fish, it could also be bad for people and other forms of wildlife. According to your maps, we're extremely low risk. It's a remote risk. There were only 8 cases in the entire state, and that's predominantly focused in eastern Massachusetts. I think we should not be in this district. We should be like Westminster and other area communities. It would save us this coming year $93,271. We're spending money on something that is extremely low risk and that could harm us.
Well, low risk doesn't mean no risk. We have identified mosquitoes with Triple E virus around the Fitchburg Airport in years past. And that's one of our trap sites that we currently maintain each year. Thankfully, we have not identified it in many years since then. But Triple E has been expanding its historical area from the southeastern part of Massachusetts up even as far as the New Hampshire border now, and it's moving westward as well. As far as fish-bearing waters, there is a restriction on the label. Fish, for some reason, are very sensitive to any pyrethroid product. So as a precaution, we do observe a setback of at least 100 feet from fish-bearing waters. In most instances, since the product we're using is oil-based, the fish would not have exposure to it anyway, because if there was a misapplication, it would strictly float on the surface of the water and decompose very rapidly. But there is a restriction on the label, and we observe that as well as additional precautions as well. And also, let's not forget, the fish biology is significantly different than our biology, our pets' biology, et cetera. So there are some instances where something might be more susceptible to a product that other things are not. So it is something that's been very well studied.
Yeah, no, just with respect to the low numbers of cases, I guess one could also think that perhaps the reason there's not so much virus around is that you've been effective in controlling the mosquitoes up till now and prevented it. If we didn't do anything about mosquitoes, who knows what what we would have in terms of virus.
Last year was a tough year, too, as well. As folks recall, it was very drought conditions, very rare.
And the other thing to point out, these private companies that do offer the spraying, that's all they're able to offer. They don't do wetland treatments. They're not allowed to by wetlands protection laws. I doubt they're going to do tire recycling. They're more than likely not going to treat your catch basins. Public education, they might have a few brochures, but they're going to go in the school systems like we do. So again, I think that although the city spends a lot of money each year on our services, I think there's a great bang for the buck that the city does receive, because we may do no spraying, we may have to do a lot of spraying for virus, but that option is available to you. If the city were not in a program and virus is identified, what are you going to do? Because these private companies are very limited in what they're able, they have backpacks that they go in people's yards. They're not going to be able to do wide areas or even, high schools or things like that, I don't think so.
Super.
Most important, private pest control companies aren't doing the most important thing in mosquito control, which is surveillance, which is getting the most important part of mosquito control, or from what I said, is surveillance, getting the testing done. Because if you have a good surveillance program, it allows you, whether somebody wants to be sprayed or not, allows you to get the word out that they can protect themselves and avoid mosquito bites. And that's the importance of having all these towns in a district, is that it gives you better coverage in your surveillance. It gives you a better idea of what these viruses are doing. That's why we were very excited when Gardner joined, because it gives us more information for the community as to what's going on. And I know you're not going to be able to find anybody that does surveillance like we do, especially in concert with the Department of Public Health. We bring in we trap, we bring in thousands and thousands of mosquitoes each week. They're separated by species. The ones that we know that vector and carry disease are sent directly to the Department of Public Health, and the Department of Public Health tests these mosquitoes and lets us know whether or not there is something to be concerned about in the environment, whether people should be extra cautious around mosquitoes or just be, generally cautious, So I think I'm pretty passionate about it, because I think that's the most important part of this program.
And thank you, Tim, for bringing that up, because again, the surveillance is what drives our program, and it's our early warning system. By capturing the mosquitoes, especially the bird-biting ones with virus, we know that virus is now in the environment, and whether or not it transmits over to the human or horse population is anyone's guess. But at least we know that the virus is existing, and messaging can start to go out from there. The surveillance program is very labor-intensive. We'll process easily 100,000 mosquitoes a year. And again, those numbers that I show were very depressed because of last year's drought situation. So it's not uncommon for our technicians to go out and, we have up to 24 sites in the city of Fitchburg, being a fairly large geographic town, that we will put these surveillance traps up. But every single mosquito that we capture gets looked at under a microscope and is cataloged. And then those species that we're concerned about with disease transmission are the ones that are tested. The other ones are simply database as part of, data collection.
One more question then, I'm sorry. You're getting exercise here.
You showed, one of the graphs you showed of the entire state of Massachusetts, and then you had all the blue blocks of different colored blues. Westminster, who does not do anything, was right alongside of us, and they were very low, just like we are. That's one thing, if you could show that again, to show Westminster and all the other states, there are towns that don't spray. They're all very low as well. If somebody lives in an apartment or a duplex, how do they opt out? Because somebody else owns that duplex or that apartment, and that individual renting may not want their area sprayed. And again, you also brought up gardening. Just like Roundup, it will go into the soil. When we water, it goes down. Those plants suck it up, and it's in the plant. So you can't just wash it off.
Pyrethroids are not a systemic type of pesticide, so it strictly stays on the surface of the plant and decomposes very rapidly in sunlight. The map you refer to is strictly last year's risk map from EEE. That does change on a year-to-year basis, of course. And what was the third point? I'm sorry, the middle one. Apartments and renters can put an exclusion request through the process. However, I might be wrong in this, Tim might know better. I believe the landlord or the owner might have the ability to override that, but I'm not sure. Do you know for sure?
I'm not sure
It hasn't come out.
how that law actually reads, but I can tell you how we read it at Central Mass Mosquito Control. If we get a resident from, say, I'm going to make up an apartment complex, say Shady Brook Apartments. I don't know if there's a Shady Brook in Fitchburg. If there is, excuse me, I'm totally making it up. If there's a resident in 1A who doesn't want to be sprayed, we go out and see where it is. I mean, some not so much in Fitchburg, but like in Chelmsford, Westburg, they have some complexes that are massive. I mean, like 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks. So we may not be able to spray part of the complex, but be able to spray the other part. I guess my main point being is if we get a no spray in an apartment complex, we still, whether they own the building or not, if they're living there, that's good enough for us.
How do you keep my neighbor's spray out of my yard, though?
Excuse me?
How do you keep my neighbor's spray out of...
We stay far enough away. So
Yeah, the no spray, the person who has their property, well, the person who makes say if you don't want your property sprayed, then we do everything we can to make sure that we don't spray on your property. If that means that your neighbor who called to be sprayed doesn't get sprayed, so be it. It's not perfect, but we put the no spray above any adult decided request that we got.
I have a quick follow-up question there.
Go ahead.
You had mentioned surveillance and how that's one of the most important things that you do for us. Some of these towns who don't surveil, like Westminster, I imagine, where is that data even coming from for that map that's showing them, low risk? Is there any data that backs that up? Or, because if they're not surveilling,
Mass Public Health will put out some regional traps, but we're talking one per 50 square miles.
Yeah.
They just don't have the staff to cover it.
The other thing to know is that because Fitchburg and surrounding communities have a trap, so they'll take the information from Fitchburg and say Gardner and say Lancaster, Leominster, and maybe get and some towns that aren't doing any trapping, but they'll benefit theoretically from the towns that are trapping because they're going to be included in that ratio in the.
DPH will take our information and use it.
But what you're saying is that a town like Westminster may not even be accurate because there aren't many traps there. So the fact that it shows lower numbers of mosquitoes or virus may not be correct.
But I'm also saying that they benefit from the towns that are in mosquito districts because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, if there's West Nile virus in Gardner or Fitchburg or Leominster, we got to protect ourselves because we're next door. They're not going to stop because...
I understand. I'm just saying that I don't know if we could be reassured by the data that come from Westminster because there isn't much data, I think Ian was pointing out.
It said 2022 and 2021.
That was for, maybe it was, yeah, that might have been for those seasons.
2 seasons.
We have been a high-risk community at a few years. The years escape me what years, but we've been a high-risk community, and we've had West Nile virus cases as well as EEE cases in Pittsburgh.
And just so residents who don't want to be sprayed know, we're not looking to spray anybody who doesn't want to be sprayed. It's not in our operating procedures. It doesn't benefit us in any way, and it's only going to cause the applicator and ourselves more trouble. So we're not interested in spraying anybody who doesn't want to be sprayed. That's why we give such a large cushion to those who don't want to be sprayed. And that's why some residents who might want to be sprayed may not be able to get sprayed if they're near somebody who doesn't want to be sprayed. I know that sounds kind of cocky, but go ahead.
So, how would we find out if there's going to be aerial spraying? How would the health department notify us as Fitchburg residents?
Well, from what I understand, there is no aerial spraying available in Fitchburg, so there would have to be an application process gone through. I'm sure the Board of Health would be informed of that, and I would expect that it would somehow be publicized that aerial spraying was going to take place. I'm sure there would probably be a public hearing on it and availability to protest if one didn't like the idea of it. Apparently, it hasn't been done whatever. So,
in the past, Mass Department of Public Health not only communicates with the local health departments, they put out press releases. Oftentimes there's public hearings. Nowadays it might be virtual, of course, with that option available as well. But there would be a lot of information that would be put out by Mass DPH, because again, I think one of their biggest strengths is public notification. They really, they hit the airwaves. I've seen commercials. You know, they'll produce commercials if they have to, but, you know, they'll use all the social media platforms. They'll use local contacts, especially, which we find our biggest benefit from as well. But if it were to occur, there'd be a lot of information that would come out. They often recommend that communities do reverse 911, code red, whatever is currently in place, and communities have done that in the past as well. So that is a system that, you know, Mass Department of Public Health, and in their minds, it's not as much alerting residents to the spray, it's alerting residents to the risk of mosquitoes and that a spray will occur. Right. Again, that's how they phrase it, because that's how they're viewing it, you know, which might be 180 degrees from others, but that's generally how their messaging comes out.
well, again, I want to thank you for coming and educating us. I'm sure you spent a lot of time putting that informative presentation together, so I appreciate the investment you made, and I think it's very helpful for us to be educated about this problem. And I also thank those who have brought up this question. It's not something I have to confess I'd really given thought about. I had not ever been aware of aerial spraying, and I guess it's because we haven't ever had it. But I think it's been educational, and as I said at the beginning, I think it's nothing wrong with looking at things that we do around here and deciding if it's still a good thing to do. I'll just speak personally now. I think that you're very regulated both by government and by yourselves. You're very careful about what you do to keep us safe. I think it's probably a very difficult job to control mosquitoes and eliminate all the potential risks that they bring. So at least personally, I think you're doing it safely, with consideration to the population, with consideration to health, and I have no expertise, certainly, or any inclination to change anything about what you do. I think you're doing a great job. So I personally would, that would be my thought. I don't know if the other members of the board have any input that they would like to make.
Thank you, Doctor.
No, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming also. It seems like we have come quite far from 1918.
Yeah.
I have one more question, maybe. And Ms. Wedge brought up the number, I think, was $93,000 something. And so is that I'm no numbers guru or anything like that, but is that something that the city of Fitchburg pays your company on a yearly basis?
Yes, that's the annual assessment that the Department of Revenue calculates. We don't have control over the assessments because the assessments are based on the size of the community as well as the equalized evaluations of the community. So typically, the larger the town and area, the larger the assessment. So that's a number that DOR comes up with. Then that amount is withheld by the state, and since we're a state agency as well, it's put into our budget. And all of our member communities, that's how the funding does occur.
Yeah, I think that's important. They're not a private company. They're part of they're a government agency, and the money that's assessed is part of the state budget or city budget. I don't know exactly who pays it, but that's all set out each year and what they're allowed to utilize to control the problem. So they're not a private company. It's part of a budget. I think any changes that would be requested or need to be made would probably need to be done through the city council anyway, but I'm sure that they would be looking for the input of the Board of Health with respect to our recommendations. I personally would make a motion that we not make any changes to what you currently do, but encourage what you do. I think it's keeping us safe, and you're doing it safely, and you're doing it well. So I would make a motion that essentially we make no changes to the current mosquito control regimen that's utilized in Fitchburg and in this area. That's my motion. I don't know if anyone else is in agreement.
I don't know if we needed to make a motion tonight. Do we want to make a motion on this? Do we need to make a motion on this?
Well,
Or is this just the start of a
I
discussion?
think that I heard some concerns about allowing residents and feedback.
That's what I'm kind of referring
Yeah.
to. I don't want it to end here if people want to.
We went back and forth on trying to get everybody on a date, and it snuck up on me as far as trying to hammer down a date that everybody was available to attend. We could one, put it on the webpage and put some sort of survey out there that folks would like to comment or give feedback, and maybe we take that feedback and take a look at it and then make a decision on a vote. It's entirely up to you.
It sounded like there were people who wanted to voice their concerns who didn't maybe have a chance to this evening. So just in the issue of fairness, it's an important, it's important health and safety issue in the city. I'd be okay with giving it a little bit more time.
And then we advertise it that we're looking for your feedback, and
Yeah, and if
where
they
you
can,
could do
maybe
that.
they can write in or whatever.
Is
but
that
just
more-
give
is that
people more
reasonable?
time to comment.
Yeah, can we post anything, like in any of the windows of the businesses, so people walking by and around town can also see? Because not everybody looks at your webpage.
No, I know that, but we would put it on social media on where to find the information, and as many places as we can. I'm not a huge fan of posting things because it turns to litter quickly, but
That's private property. You
yeah.
can't go putting
But
stuff on people's
I mean, we will do as much as we can on social media, where most people pay attention to. I mean, we could always do a public hearing, but I've done 100 public hearings, and it's the same people that show up every time. So whether that's worth it, I don't know.
I made my motion purely so
Correct.
that if it does go to the city council, they would know the sentiment of the Board of Health, but I certainly respect the other opinions. I think that I'll withdraw my motion. If you want to put it out there for some sort of public input, that's fine. And then we can bring it up. We'll put a time limit on that, and then
In a future meeting?
we can reconsider it at another meeting in the near future. How's that?
I don't want to sway your
No, I mean, I
discussion.
I think I gave my opinion,
Yeah.
but I also respect the fact that perhaps those who, there may be others who have input that we have not heard that it would be appropriate to listen to. So I can withdraw my motion, and we'll certainly listen to additional opinions. We have to figure out the best way to do
McGuinty
that.
has a question.
I was just curious, what is the question that you're going forward to the residents with, the comment? I mean, is the, I think you're requesting that they, Fitchburg opt out of aerial mosquito spray, they don't do mosquito aerial spray. Right. That's the
Exactly, that was the initial question, I think, was aerial spraying, and we don't do it, so.
But I think your presentation, as far as I'm concerned, alleviated all the concerns that were brought before us, at least in the beginning of this meeting. Some have maybe emerged since then. I don't want to assume that everyone else had the same questions as the two people sitting here. That's all. I know we meet at 4 o'clock, so it is hard for some people.
I think the question then that's coming up is, do we do mosquito control at all? Because we don't do aerial spraying, so that there's no argument about that. It's not done. So beyond that, what do? We do ground control by all kinds of means, surveillance and so on. How much of that, and it sounds to me as if it's all done very safely and with great consideration to personal opinions. If you don't want to be sprayed, tell us you don't want to be sprayed on the ground. So, I mean, what are we looking to ask people to do? I think, are we going to make some kind of substantive change to the way we approach this problem? I'm not in favor of that. But if you want to start putting out for opinions and asking, I'm sure we're going to get a million different complaints about this, that, and the other thing. But I think it's been shown that all these things are very safe and effective. And that's why I made the motion.
I would just ask if you were going to put something out on a website that you're very clear that Central Mass Mosquito Control doesn't do any aerial spraying. Right. And if aerial spraying is to happen in the state, it's not decided at our level. It's decided at Department of Public Health and the governor's level. They may ask us for assistance in trap information and stuff, but
we can construct a what do they call it in Israel, the Iron Dome, to protect. We'll build it over Fitchburg so none comes in here, even though the rest of the state's doing it, I guess.
I guess I would work with you on what the language is. Obviously, it wouldn't be aerial spraying. I'm just trying to...
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah.
I couldn't guess what the concerns would be after the presentation.
I suppose another approach would be to say, I think we've resolved the question of aerial spray. Number one, it's not done. We've answered that. The initial concerns have been addressed. If there are other concerns to be brought up in the future, perhaps they can be brought up in the future. I don't want to start putting things out there that might come up. I think it might be better. We've made a decision about aerial spraying because it doesn't exist. And that's answered the initial concerns, and the reason we had this meeting. I think if there are additional concerns, they can be brought up again. I don't want to start making a debate here tonight with all the things that
I think
might
as
come
you
to
explain
mind.
it that way, that makes sense to me. We have, the petition was for aerial spraying, and I think that has been adequately addressed.
I was just wondering if their contract was up and why we're not hiring locally from Fitchburg if it's a contract issue.
We're not a contractor, we're a state agency. And Fitchburg has been a member since 1974. So they were one of the founding communities that formed us. So we're set up, again, not a private company, so it's much different. Private companies operate as freely as they want. I'm all supportive of that. So.
If we're going to make a motion about this, perhaps we could make a motion that, at least if I were making it, I would say I recommend no changes in the current approach to aerial spraying in Fitchburg. Essentially that it isn't done, that if it is going to be done, it will go through proper channels for notification and approval.
And debate.
And so I think everyone can feel comfortable with that and safe. It's not done. We don't have aerial spraying. And if it's going to be done, it's got to go through certain channels. So.
I actually was going to chime in on this, and you were asking about how would I know if it was going to be if we were going to be doing any spraying. I mean, if the state was going to do any aerial spraying. The only time they've ever done it was in the presence of EEE. So if you start getting into July and August, and you start hearing news reports about EEE, that would be a good time to start asking questions, and you would start with the Department of Public Health, because they generally operate those things, and they're pretty easy to get through to. They would give you the same information that the Board of Health here would give you, because that would be the line. The Department of Health would make a decision when they let the health, I assume. I guess I should speak to that.
It also sounds like there's nothing to opt out of.
Right.
Well, Westminster's not in this group, so they
Well, I
obviously
mean,
opt out.
your petition was for aerial spraying. We can't opt out of aerial spraying. I'll rephrase it.
All right, well, then I will make a motion that we leave the current policies with respect to aerial spraying intact and unchanged. And essentially, the current policies is there is no aerial spraying, and that if aerial spraying is to be introduced, it will be done by a state agency and will certainly require the approval of those who are going to get sprayed on. So I'll just simplify it and say, I make a motion that we make no changes to the current policies with respect to aerial spraying in the city of Fitchburg. Is that?
That's not accurate, is it? That's not accurate what he says, is it? That if they want an aerial spray, that it won't be done without our consent. If it's aerial spray, we don't have a way to opt out, do we?
You have, again, there's so many variables involved, I can't speak to that because I don't make those decisions. So I don't know what the situation is at Tripoli, is it in humans, there have been deaths, I mean, what time of year, what's the current mosquito population, what are weather patterns? These are risk assessments that public health makes, not us.
So no one can promise us that we can be opted out of aerial spraying if the state decides to do it.
Again, I make no promises except that we work as hard as we can in the framework that we have, but aerial spraying is not in our framework.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have any decision over any aerial spraying was done in Fitchburg.
Or any opting in or opting out, that's just not us.
That's a state government decision, if I understand.
This is what's confusing. We are part of state government, but we're not part of that would make the decision on whether or not aerial spraying would be done, and what procedures would be done on who could be sprayed and who couldn't.
But Dr. Bogdasarian is saying, oh, let's keep the current system in place and you'll have an opt-out from aerial spraying if it comes to that, and that's not true. We don't have an opt-out.
No, I didn't say, I don't think I said opt-out. I said we would have input. We would be able to express opinions, but whether that would allow us to opt out, I don't know. You know, sometimes these things are all double-edged swords. The fortunate part is usually these treatments are the blunt edge of the sword. They're not going to hurt a lot of people. The sharp edge of the sword is meant for the mosquitoes. I think that sometimes the good of the population counts over what each individual might not agree with. But if you're going to save 8 million people from West Nile or Tripoli, a couple other people might have to make sacrifices in terms of getting sprayed on. It's just the way it is. But that's going to be a state decision. I agree. If you're spraying all over the state, probably you're not going to be able to protect your own house unless you close all your windows and do whatever you do. But that's not a decision that these gentlemen make or we make. It'll be a state decision. So again, my motion is simply to leave the current policies in place.
I'll second that motion.
And Diane, are you?
Agreement with that also.
Okay. Yeah. So we're unanimous in adopting that proposal. Again, I want to thank you guys for all the time you spent preparing this, and I found it extremely educational. And I thank Jacqueline and I've forgotten your name, but
Gene.
Yeah, Gene, for bringing up the question. I think it's, as I said, it's always reasonable to consider these things and look at what we do. But at least I feel educated. I feel that we're doing the right thing now, and I think we should continue it. That's personal.
We're always willing to come in and talk to you guys about anything.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
You've been great.
Always been a great partner.
Can't
say enough.
Agreed, and I would like to put a plug for Steve because our communications over the years has been very beneficial to our program as well as you know, the city itself. So it's been a good two-way street, and email, phone calls, and I even give out myself in the season that I keep on up until bedtime, which seems to be getting earlier each year.
Well, if I could have a private conversation with you later to figure out how you can get Steve to be nice to you, I'll appreciate that.
These guys take 5,000 tires.
And how do we get a hold of your department? I didn't get that off there.
Do you have a pen?
I do.
Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You okay, Karen? Well,
Thank you for explaining that, your motion.
oh,
That made much more sense to me as you
well,
explained.
no, you straightened me out.
Definitely makes sense.
No, I think just to, because it was starting to get like,
Agreed.
All right. Were you gentlemen, or I can't say that anymore, were you folks able to see the minutes? I know I didn't give you much time, but,
I did, I read them.
Oh, you did?
I got here early, so
I read through them also.
oh, you did?
A few little typos, which I can't remember now, but did you have anything you wanted corrected?
I did not, no.
I thought everything was.
No, I kind of read past typos. I'm not good at catching them.
I tried to get them out quick, so I apologize for the typos. I will review them again.
Yeah, as long as it says what it's supposed to,
That was kind of where I was
I
going.
could tell everything
this is the budget.
accurate was done by Karen, and everything inaccurate was done by you.
You can see that, huh?
No, I have
Okay.
these from Jackie, and I have these, but
I mean,
Do you have another packet?
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't give you one?
I have one. She doesn't.
I didn't give Diane one?
And got one of the minutes, or,
Did I borrow yours?
oh, is that
You can have things attached.
she's got it, I think.
Okay.
I get it. Thank you.
Okay, so should we make a motion then to approve the minutes of the March 16, 2023 meeting as they are?
I second.
yeah, I actually made a copy of that and read it, but I didn't see the part on the budget, and...
No, that's separate.
Okay, good, because that's a lot of numbers.
No, it's just the, I think it ends,
I think you can abstain from those minutes since you weren't here. So,
Okay, great.
that's fair too. All right, then we'll consider the minutes adopted.
Excellent.
And the number 4 on the agenda is fiscal year 24 Health Department budget.
So since our last meeting, the finance team and the mayor has made their adjustments to the budget. The changes from the original budget, and Diane, if you feel like you're being bombarded with numbers, you are.
Yes.
But I'll try to make it easiest as possible.
Thank you.
So, back in March, the board approved the budget. So now, way to the right of the budget, and I believe I highlighted it, although yours is dark, mine is.
Where it says 25,000.
Basically, that shows the changes of what the mayor and the finance team has done to the budget. So they have cut the deputy director position. We never did hire that position, so that position has been cut. Other than that, you can see on that page, there is no other changes to the department at this time. Personal services wide.
So in other words, they're saying we're not going to have a deputy director.
That is correct.
Okay.
But we do have the ability to hire an additional clerk, which I think will be very helpful to assist Karen in the office. And we also have a second clerk who is close to retirement, so we can hopefully get that clerk up to speed before the other clerk, the third clerk, retires.
Is that a clerk who does just the Board of Health or does city business?
I
in
don't
general?
believe we'll lose Karen for the Board of Health meetings, but it'll assist her with all the office duties and hopefully take some pressure off of her spend a little bit more time on numbers and budgets and programs, and let the new clerk handle with the customer questions and the telephone and a lot of the other duties that you need to get done in the office.
And where would the funding for that position come? Is
That funding is about 90% grant funding, so that clerk will have to spend some time with all the grants that we have in the department. I think there's upwards of about 10 or 12. So some of them are reimbursable grants, so monthly invoicing and quarterly invoicing for some becomes a lot of work for the office. So I think that individual could not only help with the deliverables of the needs of the grant, but also the keeping the finances in shape. So allows Karen to kind of do what a principal clerk, stenographer is supposed to be doing, rather than everything.
So that doesn't show up as a budget item because it would be coming out of grants, the funding for that.
So
Excuse me.
you will find that under clerical, you'll see principal clerk. That would be Karen. And then the second one is actually our clerk in the office, Lois. She is 50% paid by the community CDBG, as well as 50% paid by the city. And then the third clerk would be the new clerk.
Oh.
And so you'll see the salary far to the right, and then at the bottom, certain grants are paying for that salary. So it's it doesn't really show it in the budget what a grant actually applies to the salary, but there is a reduction of kind of
Gotcha, thanks.
kind of hard to see it by the numbers, but
No, I think I understand what you're saying.
okay.
So we approved this budget before, right?
That's correct.
So the only change...
This is more of an update.
Yeah.
Can I answer any questions on the personal services end on page of this to make things a little bit easier? No drastic changes, other than the clerk position, the deputy director position, as well as the homeless outreach stipend was a state ARPA grant. State ARPA money runs out at the end of this fiscal year. So we will be, that stipend actually allows Sue Christensen to conduct our homeless outreach program. So we will be searching ways, and there are some irons in the fire on continuing to keep that program going and ways to fund it. So hopefully I'll have more information on that in the future. But those are really the changes within personal services, not a ton.
Gotcha.
I know it's a lot of numbers to gather at the last
Well, I think
minute.
what's helpful is it's all been approved. There's only one change, and that
Right.
is,
So on the next page is the department's expenses. The only drastic changes are, incidentally, I forgot to mention in personal services, we have hired a weights and measures inspector. So there is an individual conducting or ready to be trained to conduct weights and measures inspectors. That is a state mandated position. That person basically goes out to grocery stores, and anything that has a scale or a scanner seals that device. We do have a person on board. Unfortunately, that person had to step in at the landfill because we had a employee that was having a hip replacement. So he hasn't been fully trained yet, but we hope to get him fully trained within the coming months. And you'll see that the expenses, basically we have to buy that position a whole bunch of equipment. And that's about $15,000 worth of equipment that we've encumbered from last year. So we don't need the $15,000 again this year. We just need about $2,500. There has been no cuts It's just a reduction in the expenses and the equipment necessary to keep that program going. So no drastic changes in expenses. Anything I can explain on that? I know it's a lot to absorb in a matter of 2 minutes.
No, I'm okay. I mean, this is really the city budget, right? So
Correct.
essentially, is this primarily informational for us? I mean, we don't, or do we have to make a motion to?
I think a motion to allow it to approve it to go forward or not, an objection is
I see.
is certainly, this will be going before the council.
Yeah.
It came out last week. It will be going through the council this coming week, and councilors will be proposing cuts to the budget. I have met with several city councilors so far, so I haven't heard of any proposed cuts yet, but any further cuts, but I would certainly discuss them with you.
Well, perhaps we could make a motion to approve the budget as is pending any future discussion or alterations made by the city.
I think that would be acceptable. I would just like to go over the next 2 pages really quickly. The next one is the public health nurse. As you know, our public health nurse retired in January. So we have not replaced that position yet. It will hopefully be posted very shortly. I have proposed to, one of the grants is the Public Health Excellence Grant that we just received in the last year or two, which encourages regionalization. So a lot of the duties of the public health nurse will now become part of, or 50% of the job will now be city, and then another 50% will be help to cover the region. The idea was to let the grant cover half the salary so the city could save some money, and in turn keep up with the needs of the Public Health Excellence Grant. So that's about a $17,000 savings there.
Okay.
Other than that, there's real no changes. Can I move on, or is there any questions?
I'm all set.
I have a question. Is the COVID-19 response unit, that's a big number.
So we have received $240,000 for the COVID response team last year, for the last 2 years, actually. It is going into a third, this fiscal year, FY24. However, DPH is allowing us to change. Since there is no longer a COVID emergency, they will still be doing some contact tracing, but not as much. But I'm actually going to change the name of that team. We already have, actually. It's going to be the disease response team. And basically, they are going to cover all 13 of the communities in the town, seeing as though it is a regional grant in addition to the Public Health Excellence Grant, which is about a total of close to $800,000. So we are going to be training them and they're actually already being trained to do surveillance and disease investigations and outreach for various clinics, not just COVID clinics. They're actually working on our fall flu clinics in all 13 of the communities. So they already have a schedule for the fall on flu clinics, and we'll be ordering our flu vaccine as soon as we're able, very shortly. I'm glad you asked that. Thank you.
It's a big number.
It is a big number. And just to add, the Public Health Excellence Grant that we just got, about $555,000, also requires us to have an epidemiologist and a shared services coordinator within that grant. And the EPI would work with all 13 towns, as well as the shared services coordinator, and the shared services coordinator would help run the grant as well as keep all the community's needs, such as intermunicipal agreements and billing, and try to sell it to additional communities so that we have 13 now, maybe a few others want to join in the future. So it's required by the grant. But big numbers there, yes.
What is the, maybe it's on here, but I'm not seeing it, the overall budget of the city in terms of,
I didn't bring the book with me.
oh,
I think
that's
it
all
was,
right, it's all right.
I can share it with you. I had it with me.
No, I didn't know if it was just on the top of your head, like
Yeah,
I said,
I
$50
did.
million, or what order of magnitude?
I think it's around 200 million,
200 million, yeah. Well,
but I can share that with you.
no, that's,
I had it with me and I put it down on the way over here.
that's right. Well,
So the last item or last page relates to rubbish collection as well as rubbish disposal.
Been a lot of talk about that.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to discuss the budget. We did go out to bid. We did have two bidders. E.L. Harvey is going to be taking over the trash collection. Trash collection has been quite a sensitive subject in the last year or so. So we're going to save about $300,000 with E.L. Harvey. Hopefully, they will be able to improve the services, and we won't have the delays and the missed pickups that we're experiencing now.
That was, the previous one's Waste Management.
Correct. So E.L. Harvey will be, effective July 1st, will be provided, we work out a language in our contract. They haven't agreed to the written contract as of yet, but hopefully by July 1st, we'll have that worked out, and they will be collecting the trash as well as yard waste, which yard waste collection has been quite the adventure
Yeah.
for the last 3 or 4 seasons.
Could I just, E.L. Harvey, are they kind of a regional company or a national company?
They are based out of Westboro,
Oh, okay, so,
and they also have a transfer station in the city of Fitchburg on Arbor Drive over by Monty Tech.
oh, okay.
So they are looking to expand into community collections. City of Gardner just went to E.L. Harvey, I believe, within the last couple of years. So E.L. Harvey will be taking our trash July 1st as well as yard waste. I know I've been asked 1,000 times. The yard waste schedule is not out beyond June 30th because we haven't signed a contract yet. But as soon as that contract is signed and we'll pick the yard waste weeks, I will get them advertised as quickly as possible. So Waste Management will still be doing recycling collection. Hopefully with the reduction of services, maybe we'll help them with
Staying on
improving and staying on top of the schedule. 2 different contracts. Recycling collection is its own. I'm sorry. Trash collection is a separate contract from recycling collection because recycling is a deal of the landfill. So 2 different contracts,
I didn't know that.
which is why Waste Management collects recycling for free. Has since the early 90s. Hard to beat and bid against free.
Yeah.
And then the disposal costs are what it costs to, once we pick it up, that's what it costs the city to dispose of it at the landfill. And that's a small increase, usually adjusted by the consumer price index. So basically, we pay a per ton fee, usually that goes up according to the CPI annually. The last line item is a closed closed landfill maintenance fund. Right now, that is directed at our Blueberry landfill, which you may recall, AKS Recycling operates a transfer station. Next to it, they use the old landfill Blueberry Lane off Airport Road for storage of their materials. They can't dig, but they can store materials. That landfill closed in 1971. It ran for 3 to 5 years in that range. We are looking to install environmental equipment, groundwater monitoring devices, gas methane devices, and we will contract with an engineer to design that, as well as the installation and then the annual monitoring of it. We will be submitting those plans to the Department of Environmental Protection for approval very shortly. And we already have the contract in place for the monitoring annually, and that's the $54,000 you're looking at. Clear as mud?
Good enough.
So the waste management is now going to be doing the recycling only?
Correct.
And they're not still, that there's going to be a separate expense for that?
Nope, it's actually free as part of the landfill contract, so there is no expense for it.
So
Interesting.
you were saying it's hard to bid against that.
It's
Yeah.
hard to bid against that.
Fair enough. Well, should we make a motion then that, to approve the budget pending any, as is, pending any changes made by the city council?
I think that's acceptable.
Okay. Is that-
Yep, I'll second. Or you can second it.
Whatever. Do you need a third?
We're all in favor.
We're all in favor, okay. Perfect.
So the next thing is announcements.
Yes.
Tomorrow, Friday, June 2nd, from 9:30 to 3 in this building, or right outside this building, we're going to be hosting a blood drive. So folks can sign up for the blood drive. I believe there is some space still available. Maybe the best way is right now to call the office, and we'll get folks registered, because there is a sign-up website that's a little bit complicated here to read out. So my suggestion here is to call the office at 978-829 1870, and we'll get you registered for that event, which is tomorrow, 9:30 to 3. The bus will be out front. It'll be visible. In July, July 8th, actually, at our Fitchburg Westminster landfill will be our first of 2 household hazardous waste days. I urge people to utilize that. It is on the Health Department webpage for those materials that you can bring. It's free. Check your garage, check your basement, and make sure you're removing those materials and properly disposing them. It's free, and it's a great service. I encourage folks to use it. The first one is July 8th. That's a Saturday from 9 a.m. to 12 noon.
And these are hazardous materials, you said?
Hazardous materials, yes.
Paint and that kind of stuff?
Yep, paint would be lead paint is the only, or oil-based paint is the only hazardous material. Latex paint is actually, you can dry it out and throw it away in your trash, but we ask that you dry it out so it doesn't paint our streets once it enters the trash truck. And then, as we discussed earlier, trash recycling. Right now, folks are a bit frustrated. Waste Management is behind once again. Last I knew, about 3 hours ago, they were still working on the Tuesday routes. So they're looking at probably a 2-day delay. We will be discussing with them on trying to, increase resources for the next 2 days. They will be working on Saturday. So there is, it looks like earlier that it's about 2 days behind. I don't know what's happened since then, but just want folks to be aware. Folks can use the landfill. They don't need a permit at the moment. They can use their driver's license to prove they're a resident if they don't wish to wait around for the 2-day delay for collection.
What is the reason, Steve, for the collections to be behind? Is it just there's a lot of trash there, or Are they short-staffed?
They're short-staffed, one, and number two, they're inexperienced staff. So they're running the routes, they're completing the routes, but they're missing a lot of streets. Fitchburg has a lot of small streets, a lot of hills, a lot of woods that hide streets.
Yeah.
Not making excuses for them because they have missed 5-mile-long roads as well, but they're just not familiar with the city. And that's really the biggest problem.
The driver at our house, when the trash was picked up, I think it was Tuesday, was driving and getting out and emptying it too, and then getting back in and driving. So it's like, used to be 2 people in a truck. It's, everybody's short-staffed.
Yeah.
I think they're probably doing the best they can with what they have, with their
Right.
resources.
Frustrated.
It is frustrating.
I also have one final announcement. I'm sorry, I thought the last one was final, but folks have been asking about landfill permits. We do issue about 2,000 landfill permits a year. We're working on changing the system. We're getting it away from stickers. Hopefully we can get this done in the next week or two. But we're going to be getting away from stickers and using RFID cards and scanners. So that program is kind of slowly falling into place, and it's the reason why we're not selling stickers right now. So folks, just remain patient for a little bit while we put that program together and get it working and get all the materials delivered. Hopefully that will be in the next week or two, and we'll start selling the RFID cards instead of the stickers. And basically at the landfill, the attendant will have a scanner, so the approval process will be a little bit easier and smoother, and you won't have to have a sticker on your vehicle. So just a little patience there. And that's all I have for announcements.
Super. Any other additions or comments? If not,
Do we have a motion to adjourn? You want to make a motion
Oh,
this
let me
evening?
make that motion to adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Do we have? Sure. I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
and I'm in favor as well.